Thank you, Casey. 6 years ago, I went back to work full-time after spending 10 years as a stay-at-home mom. Now, I didn't go straight to Google. I actually re-entered the workforce in an entirely new industry, music, at the age of 44, and I was terrified. I was worried that I would not be able to keep up with all those hip 20-somethings or be able to ramp quickly enough to be relevant. In my first day, I was introduced to the entire Nashville office as the first working mom that they had on their team. Holy crap! The first working mom in 2012? Now, this company, Creative Artists Agency, or CAA, is really fantastic. It is the world's leading entertainment agency, and it represents clients like Nicole Kidman, David Beckham, and Katy Perry. And they were wonderful to me. Fast forward 3 years, and I get a call from Google Fiber. They want me to run their Nashville office as city manager. Big job, big impact. So I left a company I love to take on a new challenge. On my last day at CAA, I went into the conference room, and there was the entire female staff, music agents, executives, assistants, interns. They had all gathered together to present me with a thank you gift. It was a framed collection of thank you notes. These were really detailed notes, and they mentioned specific ways that I had impacted them. They said that I had helped change the culture of the Nashville office and change their perceptions of working moms. I helped show them a path that they did not think was sustainable, that of a working mom in the music industry. Let me read you a highlight. One of my favorite pieces of advice from you is never to apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. As women, we are taught never to offend, never to challenge. Women like you show us that we have the right to command a room and to advocate for our skills and talents. So the entertainment industry, and particularly music, can be pretty tough for a woman. And is it any wonder, when there is such a scarcity of female executive leadership, that fewer than 17% of the Billboard Music Industry Power 100 are women? So is it any wonder that the future looked bleak for these women at CAA? I had challenged their assumptions, though, about that time that I took off to stay at home, and prove to them that it was valuable time in the workplace. So today I'm going to challenge your assumptions of what the value of that time at home is really worth. I'm going to demonstrate to you that time at home to take care of your kids is not only good for children and families, it's great for business. So I didn't always think this. Back when I started my career, I shared a lot of the same assumptions that many people do about moms who take time off to stay at home with their kids, that they're not as motivated, that they won't be able to keep up, or they're not as ambitious. And for all those moms I worked with, I'm sorry. Ladies, I hate to tell you, I never thought any of those things about the men that I worked with who became dads. So I've been pretty fortunate in my life. I've done a lot of really cool things. I launched Windows 95 in Hong Kong. I ran Nike's Global Olympic campaign for the Sydney Olympic Games. And I took Michael Jordan to Japan. And then I decided to take time off to stay at home with my kids. Now, let me tell you, every day that I stayed home with my children, I realized I was fortunate. I recognize that many women do not have the opportunity to take a few weeks off, let alone years. So no matter how many times I played Candyland or changed a diaper or soothed a tantrum, I was extremely thankful. It wasn't easy for us to get pregnant. So when I did, I made a conscious decision to step off my career trajectory and stay home. I knew there was an opportunity cost, and that I would take a wage hit, and that getting back would be hard. But for my husband and I, we knew that we could make the numbers work, and that time off was a gift. So fast forward 10 years, and my youngest is in preschool, and I finally have time to look up and take a breath and redefine who I was. And I realized that despite the fact that I was doing the thing that had the most meaning to me, raising my family, I realized I missed work, and I wanted to go back. And I wanted to be a role model for my daughters. I wanted to show them that the world was their oyster and that they could have any career that they wanted. And to show them that you could balance work and family. And you know, I wasn't alone in that. 80% of us will become moms by the time that we are 40. 71% of American moms work outside the home, and increasingly, they are the breadwinners in their family. Yet, even with this, many women still elect to take time off to stay at home raising their kids. In fact, 1/3 of working moms take an average of 3 years off to raise their family. Now, I'm sure if money were not into the equation, that number would be a lot higher, but I'll come back to that later. I found that my time at home gave me the skills that made me more valuable in the workplace. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories. Here we are. It's 2008, and I had just moved to Nashville with an 8-week-old baby, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a dog. And my husband starts commuting to Baltimore 5 days a week. So every day, I get up, I nurse the baby, I let the dog out, I get the kids up, I get them dressed, I get them fed, I get them in the van, and we head off to school. So here we are. We are pulling out of the drop-off area of my son's school when the baby starts screaming. All of a sudden, she projectile vomits all over the back of the minivan. So I grab the box of baby wipes, I throw it to the 4-year-old, I teach her how to give the baby a little bit of a wipe down, I coach her on how to calm the baby, I roll down the windows and we keep going, because God forbid we would be late to kindergarten. I drop her off and pull over at the side of the road, I find an old t-shirt in the back of the van, change the baby and head home to disinfect the car. Be resourceful, communicate, empower. Here's another day. We're riding along in the mom-mobile, and I hear a little voice in the back of the van that says, "Mom, what's a nerd?" And I pause. And despite wanting to find out which little chump called my kid a nerd, I realize this is a teachable moment. So I say to my beloved, "You know, I have a great story about a nerd. One of the most famous nerds in the world is a guy called Bill Gates. And I was lucky enough to work with him. And this nerd started a company called Microsoft. And today, this nerd uses his billions of dollars to do really important things in the world, like find cures for malaria and provide access to education. So I think nerds are really awesome." Empathize, share a vision, inspire. Now, you know, these stories are normal for any parent, but for a stay-at-home mom, they are 24/7 your job. So let's jump ahead. It's 2012, and here I am working in music, and it's the first day, and I'm the first working mom, and I've been home for 10 years. And I realize I have an opportunity to change assumptions about my relevance and about my ambition. And I realize I can have an impact on the women of CAA and demonstrate a path for them who, up until that point, thought that they would have to drop out of music if they wanted to start a family. So once I got over that shock of being the first mom, I became really intentional. I started putting things on my calendar like leave early for kids' concert. And I was refusing meetings that conflicted with school drop-off. When my kids got sick, I worked from home, and my work didn't stop. You know what? I discovered that the skills that I had perfected in my time at home, things like resourcefulness and relationship building and communication, those were the things that made me a better employee, manager, and leader. And then 3 years later, remember that call I got from Google? Turns out they were even more effective and more valuable than I realized. So one of the great things that Google does is hire people. In fact, I have heard they say it is easier to die from choking on a biscuit than it is to get hired at Google. But the work doesn't stop there. Google also invests deeply in its employees in finding ways to make them more productive, hence the massages, the great health care, and the free lunch. Google also loves data. They study everything, including how often certain people eat together and what qualities lead to managerial success. So today I'm going to share 2 Google studies with you. One of them are on the behaviors of great managers, and the second is characteristics of effective teams. In 2012, Google set out to study the behaviors that lead to managerial success at Google, which is a pretty successful company with a lot of really smart software engineers. They narrowed it down to 8 key behaviors, and they guide all their management training and development around them. The interesting thing is that most of the most important behaviors of effective managers at Google are soft skills, like empathy, communication, empowerment, and concern for well-being. The best managers at Google are first and foremost great coaches who invest time and energy in their employees' career development. In addition to setting strategy and focusing on results, they develop a climate where they showcase empathy, and concern for their employees' careers and well-being. So, do these words look familiar to you? Empathy, communication, empowerment, well-being. Think about those 10 years in that minivan. So the second study I'm going to share with you today, I love this one. It's called Project Aristotle, and it studies the characteristics of the most effective teams. So I think most people know teamwork is pretty important for business success. So in 2016, Google set out to discover how to build the most effective team. Their assumption was that if you carefully curate the smartest people and put them together in a room, that you are going to have the best outcomes. But you know what? They were surprised. Some of Google's most effective teams were comprised of employees who were friends outside of work. Others barely saw each other outside of the conference room. Some teams preferred a very strong manager, and others liked a less hierarchical structure. Most confounding of all, teams with almost exactly the same makeups had radically different levels of effectiveness. So here's what Google found out. They narrowed it down to 5 characteristics of highly effective teams, and psychological safety was first and foremost the most important. Psychological safety describes a climate in which employees feel a sense of trust and mutual respect and feel free to take risks without feeling embarrassed. Employees on effective teams are less likely to leave Google. They are more likely to harness the power of diverse ideas from their teammates, and they bring in more revenue. These other 4, structure and clarity, dependability, meaning and impact, all feed off psychological safety. So what does this mean for the stay-at-home mom? Or the woman considering whether to take time off to stay at home with her kids? Or the hiring manager looking at her resume? What does a stay-at-home mom do every day if not create a climate of psychological safety? Provide structure and clarity for her children. Help them interpret the world around them and find meaning impact in it, and finding ways to make a difference. The skills that drive the most effective managers and the most effective teams at Google are skills that stay-at-home moms work on every single day. For 10 years, I woke up and I said to myself, how do I ensure that the work that I do today has the most impact on making my kids the best humans that they can be? How do I encourage the right behaviors and empower them to feel confident enough to take risks and make smart decisions in life. The truth is, though, when you take time off to stay at home, you take a wage hit. This is called the mommy penalties. So most people know that women are paid like 82 cents on the dollar compared to their male counterparts. What you may not realize is that when you take time off to stay at home, you take a wage hit that you do not recover from. A recent study from the University of Massachusetts pegs this at 4% per child. This same study discovered that when men become fathers, their wages actually increase by at least 6%. The University of Massachusetts study found that employers value fathers more highly and hold mothers to harsher performance standards. Now remember, 71% of moms work outside the home, and 1/3 of those working moms will take time off for an average of 3 years. And this is at the time when their wages have the greatest opportunity to increase. There is a huge opportunity cost to taking yourself out of the workforce during prime time. The age 35 to 44 is when wages show the greatest lifetime gains. And this is the period when motherhood is on full-on mode for many. Getting back in can be an uphill battle. 90% of women who leave the workforce to stay home with their kids plan to go back to work, yet fewer than half of them find meaningful full-time employment. The truth is that when you take time off to stay at home, people assume your business skills die, that it's time off. But for me, I discovered that those skills made me more valuable in the workplace, and Google's research supports this. In the last 3 years, I helped open Google Fiber's office in Nashville. I rallied public support to pass landmark telecommunications legislation. I welcomed 2 new CEOs, and I deployed a new build technology. This was a lot of work. It was disruptive, and it was hard on my team. And I could not have done it without the lessons that I learned from my kids, who taught me about compassion, who taught me how to motivate in the face of adversity, and how to stand up to a bully. I've been lucky to do a lot of great things in my life, but this here is one of the best. I was invited to stand in front of the entire student body of my son's all-boys school. I'm giving a speech on how to build the internet. And you know, I looked out over those faces, those 12 to 18-year-olds slumped in their seats, my son no doubt cringing, and I thought to myself, I am the type of leader that they need to see more of. And I realized it's those opportunities, the ones where we have the chance to recalibrate what the next generation of men thinks of as normal. Those are the opportunities that will make the biggest difference for the next generation of women. It starts there, with our boys. When I went back to work, I did it in part to be a role model for my daughters. I realized it was just as important to do that for my son. I'd like to imagine a world one day where my daughters take time off to do the most important job on the planet, and they are celebrated and rewarded for making that decision. They highlight those skills on their resume and in a job interview. Because the truth is, we could all use a few more moms on our team. Thank you.